Now I want to make you. Can't see us anywhere.
I can see you, Norma. You're right.
Hi. Stay calm. You can find participants. Inot Yameinu Limnot Yameinu Limnot Yameinu Kein Oda Lenavi Leva Chochma Limnot Yameinu Kein Oda Lenavi Leva Chochma. Teach us to treasure each day. Teach us to treasure each day, that we may open our hearts to your wisdom. Oh, teach us to treasure each day. Treasure each day. Teach us to treasure each day, treasure each day. Teach us to treasure each day. We gather a week after the death of Mark Friedman, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be a blessing, to offer comfort and support to his family and friends. We gather to support his beloved wife and dearest friend, Sue, his daughter, Shana, and Shana's fiance, Jesse, his son, Mason, Mark's mother, Annette, sister Noreen and husband, Glenn, sister Riva and husband, Bob, and stepmother, Karen. We come together tonight for a virtual Shiva gathering for Mark. In addition to our Beth Chaim community, relatives and friends are with us tonight from around the country, and we're grateful you could join us. We gather virtually during this pandemic to support Mark's family. The Friedman family wanted everyone to know that there will be a celebration of life ceremony for Mark when we gather together in person and share our stories, and we hope it will be soon. Tonight, we gather virtually to offer our heartfelt support to the mourners. We access the structure of an evening service to enable the family to say the mourner's Kaddish. We will begin with a process of turning our memories of Mark into blessings by sharing some reflections, some memories that capture who Mark was for us. Sue, Shana, Mason, and other family members will not be reading the comments in the chat area as we do this tonight, but we are recording this so that the family can go back and read all of your comments. We're not going to unmute this evening, but please, if you're able, sign into the chat so that the family can be warmed by the knowledge of your presence. Thank you so much. We also ask that if you have a memory of Mark, an experience you shared with him that captures the dimension of who he was for you, please, when you get a chance, just record yourself or write it down and send it to the family. You can email it. They would be most grateful. All of us are still emotionally reeling from Mark's sudden and unexpected death last week when he went out, like he does so many nights, to rollerblade in Pleasanton and tragically suffered a fatal heart attack. Mark was a friend. He was one of the most quietly passionate people I've ever met. He cared about people and he cared about social justice. Mark was a deep thinker and generally a thoughtful man. Mark had a lot of interests, but he was not a dilettante. When he found something that spoke to his heart, he pursued it with energy and vigor. I remember when he first read about the groundbreaking work of Marshall Rosenberg on nonviolent communication. He called me up and wanted to know what I knew about it. I told him that I had read one of Rosenberg's books on nonviolent communication and that I found it very compelling. He went into it with everything he had. He read books and he shared with me quotes like this one. What I want in my life is compassion, a flow between myself and others based on a mutual giving from the heart. That really spoke to Mark. Another quote, peace requires something far more difficult than revenge or merely turning the other cheek. It requires empathizing with the fears and unmet needs that provide the impetus for people to attack each other. Being aware of these feelings and needs, people lose their desire to attack back because they can see the human ignorance leading to these attacks. Instead, their goal becomes providing the empathic connection and education that will enable them to transcend their violence and engage in cooperative relationships. Mark convinced Sue to join him in doing 2 rounds of the NVC, the Nonviolent Communication trainings, and they were able to utilize what they learned to enhance their relationship by being able to listen to one another more deeply. And it had an impact on all aspects of their lives. So in this structure that holds us tonight, the evening service, we rise for, if you're able, for the Borchu, which is a blessing that acknowledges the source of all blessings. Hi, la 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 la. Hi, la 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 la. Hi, la 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 la. Hi, la 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 la. Hi, la 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 la. Borechu Adonai HaMevorach 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 Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam 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 Amen. In Mark's latest job as Director of Business Architecture for the University of the Pacific in Stockton, he was striving to change the way professors thought about their students, related to their students, and dramatically improve the quality of the workplace. Mark was not a halfway kind of guy. He never set the bar too low and was never satisfied with partial victories. He had a great, great love for sport and fitness. Mark was a student of the game. He loved every game, be it baseball or hockey, skiing or racquetball, basketball or softball. Mark loved the game within the game. He had a special love for hockey, and he was so proud when Mason made the University of Washington hockey team and became a leader on that team. Mark had season's tickets to the San Jose Sharks, and every year he would call and invite me to come down to see a game with him. It was never just about the game. We would meet at the carpool lot and we would drive down to San Jose. Mark detested small talk. He would get right into what both of us cared about most at that moment. I would take him to dinner before the game and we would continue talking passionately. We'd talk on our walk over to the arena and find our seats. We would still be fully engaged in a soul-searching conversation until the puck dropped. Then it was the art of the game. I love hockey, but do not follow it like he did. He would fill me in on all the Shark players and all of the opponent's weapons, their strengths and their weaknesses. His ability to see what was really happening on the ice was uncanny and fascinating. It was like a master class on the fine points of professional hockey, and I loved every minute of it. In the intermissions and on the way home, we would return to our heart-to-heart conversations, and it was always wonderful. Mark loved depth, and he was also very funny. The humor was often dry and intellectual, but he knew the value of humor and when to use it. Over the years, Mark and I had so many conversations about the importance of good coaching. Good coaches, Mark used to say, are good teachers. Mark loved to teach. He was a huge supporter of the Positive Coaching Alliance. Mark loved to win, and the only thing he loved more in sports was the camaraderie, sportsmanship, and the commitment to excellence. It infuriated him in his quiet way to watch coaches who put winning above the welfare of the young people he or she was coaching. He simply couldn't abide it. Mark had a great focus and a wonderful attention. He learned some pithy aphorisms from his father, whom he loved, and he made up quite a few of his own. I think you'll probably hear one or two from his children this evening. Mark Friedman cared. He cared about what people had to say, and he listened with full attention. He would seek someone out in a room at a gathering, and he would engage that person. And invariably, the person would say, "He made me feel like the most important person in the room." Mark had a rare talent to make quality connections in all of his interactions with other people. We will miss him so much. Time is our ally in this mysterious process of mourning and grieving. When the loss is so fresh, so raw, it's impossible to fully grasp this now. But it is a deep truth about how we integrate and how we heal when we lose someone so precious. Our evening prayer, our Ma'ariv Aravim, acknowledges the way we mark time. And of course, our refrain is evening the evenings, evening the frayed edges of our lives. I invite you to join in with Zoe, my partner, in the response. Evening, the evening, evening the frayed edges of our lives. Ma'ari, Aravi, Amen. Shema Yisrael guides us to pay attention. Mark is a man who knew how to fully pay attention. Before we offer the Shema together, I invite us to listen to a few words by Mark's brother-in-law, Sue's brother, Jay Cohn from the Chicago area.
Great. Thank you, Rabbi Dan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, to my beloved niece and nephew, Shana and Mason, and of course, my very, very favorite sister, Sue, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about Mark and what he meant not only to me and Shelley, but to the rest of the extended Cohen family here in Chicago. You know how terribly much we want to be there with you tonight. Well, as a doting brother, is anyone ever good enough for your little sister? On the surface, most would say no, but I'll talk about that later. So we all know the story. As one of her older brothers, I saw Sue date a knucklehead or two, but suddenly this guy named Friedman comes into her life, thinking, Friedman, doctor, lawyer? No, but regardless, a nice Jewish man. Well, they fall deeply in love, get married, and before I knew it, Susie and Mark were packing their belongings and heading to the West Coast to go on to the next chapter in their lives. I can say we were all pretty shocked, but the fact was, my sister was in love with a man who loved her, and after all, isn't that what fairy tales are all about? So the years went on with the occasional visit from the West Coast, and probably more frequent visits from my mother and father to them, as grandparents ourselves. Shelley and I understand that a babysitter for an extended period of time is needed. A grandparent would go about anywhere. And that's exactly what my mother and father did. Spending the quality time they did with Mark, Sue, and the kids, I know, was more than a gift to them. And speaking of my parents, I always knew when Mark was coming to town for a visit, as there would be a 6-pack of Dr. Pepper in the fridge and a bottle of open pit barbecue sauce on the counter. I never quite understood the whole open pit barbecue sauce thing, but Mark seemed to convince my mother that open pit wasn't available in California. Well, then from time to time, my mother would even give me a few bottles to take down to the office and send over to Mark. Well, but the truth be known, not quite every bottle made its way into Mark's hands. And as I found, this is pretty good stuff. As our cousin made it a point of telling me, Mark had a deep reservoir of kindness. I don't think I could have said that any better. Never, ever would he put his wants or needs in front of yours. When he'd ask me about family or work, it was never, hey, how is Shelley and the kids, kind of in passing. It was always a look in the eye saying, Jay, how is Shelley and the kids? A response that he would completely absorb. My brother Bob brought up such a good point the other night that whenever Mark spoke about Sue, Shana, or Mason, it was never about giving himself a pat on the back, as if to say, hey, look what I did. It was to brag on them and saying, hey, look what they did. Now, we all know Mark may have stretched some of his assessments a little bit, but not seeing the kids that often and hearing from him talk about them, I seriously thought Shana was going to be the first female catcher in the major leagues. And Mason, I thought he was going to be the second, possibly first line center for the San Jose Sharks. But, that's Mark. Unfortunately, the final chapter is probably perhaps the finest chapter to me and Shelley on so many levels. We, along with Susie and Mark, shared an incredible passion for downhill skiing. That would guarantee to bring us together at least once a ski season. And we also had solid plans to go on so many more trips. But the actual skiing was just part of the magic, as it was the quality time that we spent together that helped us develop our deep love, respect, and understanding of one another. One time on the lift, I remember Sue remarked that one of her goals was to downhill at 80. I know what Mark was thinking. He's like, no, I'm going to be able to master the bumps on the double blacks by the time I'm 80. That's Mark. Watching out for each other on the slopes was paramount. And playing stupid, silly games on the chairlifts were sometimes that we just could never get back. I recall we invented a game not too long ago called Shots. It was that if you said something negative, you would have to do a shot during the après ski session. For those who don't know what après ski is, it's very similar to the 19th hole in golf. We were desperate in our attempts to get Mark to have a drink with us. Well, you know Mark, and guess how many negative statements he made? 0. Now that I think of it though, sitting in the hot tub at night, telling lies after ripping a few black diamonds every day wasn't too shabby. We really had some great, great times. So getting back to my original question, is anyone ever good enough for your little sister? Do I really need to answer that? He was the best. Mark, thank you for being a shining light in our stars, in our lives. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome, Rabbi. Thank you.
Shema Yisrael, as I said, guides us to listen with our hearts. And Mark was a man who taught everyone who knew him how to listen better. For Mark. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malechuto Leolam Vaed V'yavta et Adonai Elohecha B'chol levavcha U'b'chol nafshecha U'b'chol meodecha V'hayu Advarim ha'el Asher Anochi Metzavecha Hayom Al Levavecha V'shinantam Levanecha V'dibarta Bam V'shivtecha V'veitecha U'lechtecha V'derech U'shochbecha U'vkumecha U'kshavtam leot al yadecha V'hayu letotafot bein einecha U'chdavtam al mezuzot beitecha U'visharecha. Now we hear a few words from Mark's sister, Riva Michael.
Oh, you unmuted me. You have to unmute Bob and Riva.
You're unmuted, Riva. We can hear you, Riva.
I'm not Riva. I'm her daughter.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry. let's see where. Reva, could you raise your hand? We've got a lot of rooms. I'm so sorry. We're trying to find you. Bob and Reva right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, excuse me.
That's okay.
Reva.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Maddie, for that little comic relief.
Sorry.
26 years ago today, Mark spoke at my wedding. Can you see me? Because I still see Maddie. Okay. Anyway, so today I choose to remember today as a happy day. There's no amount of words to describe the void in all of our lives without Mark. For me, he's just always been there. My brother, my soulmate, my other half. From our early years through adulthood, he was my rock. Growing up in Palos was special. There were more woods than houses, so we spent a lot of time outside. We learned early to respect and cherish nature, and Mark instilled that in his children. For some reason, all the kids in the neighborhood were boys Mark's age. So we had enough kids to play baseball, ride bikes, and play flashlight tag at night. One of the kids in the neighborhood was Michael McKee. He was our own Charlie Brown. One morning, kids were picking on him at the bus stop, and Mark stood up for him. At an early age, he was not afraid to do the right thing. Mike came to a sad ending in life, and I'm proud that Mark knew to be kind. One summer, Mark and I created a day camp for the neighborhood kids. No problem at all getting customers. Neighbors really were happy to send their kids over to us for a few hours. And something people might not know is that Mark took gymnastics as a kid. So we had a long tumbling mat in the rec room and had the kids doing somersaults and contests to see who could collect the most garbage in the woods, influenced by my mother, no doubt. The kids had fun and we made some money, and thus started a long line of businesses Mark would create. As a teenager, Mark didn't always have it easy. He never drank or did drugs, a practice he continued through life. I was the wild child and he never judged. It was easier to give into those lifestyles, and it just says a lot about his character and strength. He didn't conform. His first job that he loved was busboy at the Matterhorn restaurant. He got me my first job there as a salad girl. From that job on, Mark did everything 110%. He became the best busboy, competing in contests like how many waters he could hold in one hand, whether it was being the best at waiting tables, playing racquetball, or rollerblading at 60. Mark could never do anything halfway. And that includes best all-around father, son, brother, uncle, and friend. In adulthood, his gifts grew. If he was talking to you, you were the most important person in the room, even if he just met you. I often refer to him as my own Anthony Robbins, a famous motivational speaker, in case you haven't heard the name. None of us are perfect, and Mark wasn't either, but I don't think I will ever know a pure soul on this earth. When our dad, Papa Sam, passed, Mark said to me, "It's a different world now." I envision Mark with Papa Sam and Sister Karen, among others that he loved on this earth. And with all of them together, it's a different world where they are today now too. Thank you. I love you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Reva. One of the things we're guided to do when we lose someone we love is to embrace compassion for our memories and for ourselves. When we lose a loved one, our sense of safety, of equilibrium, is upset. This prayer asks that slowly over time, we regain that in our lives. The prayer is Hashkivenu. The words are Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, spread over us wings of peace. Shalom. Ufros aleinu sukat peace, shalom. We take just a few moments in silence to offer our heartfelt prayers of condolence and comfort for Sue, Shayna, Mason, and the family. Now we invite Mark's best friend, Jeff James, to offer a few words. Jeff?
Thank you, Rabbi. Hello, everybody. And I just want you all to know that it is truly an honor to be with all of you, albeit virtually, because this is a very special time for all of us. And for me to be invited to be with you is one of the honors of my life. Thank you. Mark truly was a gift. When someone comes into your life unexpectedly and for no apparent reason, that's cause to take notice. But when that person becomes your best friend for life, that is a gift and a cause for celebration. Tonight, I'm honored to celebrate and share with you the friendship that Mark and I had for most of our lives. As some of you know, when I was 9, my father died, and as people are wont to do, my friends didn't talk to me. But Mark did. Mark befriended me when I needed a friend more than anything else. As for what everybody else said tonight, that should not surprise you at all. We enjoyed sports. Sports was a common bond for our childhood. We played wiffle ball, basketball, football, softball, baseball, street hockey, ice hockey, and if soccer was around then, we would have played it too, but it wasn't popular in the US. We watched sports at his house and at my house, as well as at the old Comiskey Park in Chicago in the International Amphitheater. One of our most memorable moments was when Bobby Hull, then of the Winnipeg Jets, scored in overtime to beat Chicago, and the place went wild. Mark and I had a moment we would never forget. We also bet on sports, but don't worry, Mark, that's just between you and me. Nobody needs to know those details. One time in Little League baseball, our two teams were playing each other. It went into extra innings and my team was out of pitchers, so the coach put me on the mound, and sure enough, extra innings, 2 outs, bases loaded, I was on the mound and Mark was at bat. Mark was smart enough not to swing at any of the 4 pitches that I pitched that day. I walked him and his team won. Clearly, Mark was the better athlete. Except on the ice, I could skate forwards and backwards in circles around him. Every other field of competition, though, Mark was king. We went to different colleges, Mark to University of Illinois and I to Northern Illinois University. As we grew into adulthood, our friendship continued. We were there for each other when we got married, kids came along, and Mark, in true Mark style, considered my kids to be his kids. When our youngest, Julia, was diagnosed with cancer, Mark was devastated. I'll never forget the night I called him. But after Julia beat her first cancer and then completed applications to college, Mark was in Chicago for a visit, and he asked if he could write a letter of recommendation for her. But first he said, can I have an hour or so with Julia to interview her, because I want my letter of recommendation to be truly authentic. Who does that? Mark Friedman does that. As you know, as some of you know, Julia was diagnosed with cancer a second time, and this time, despite fighting harder than she ever did, she could not beat it. At Julia's wake, Mark gave a speech that touched everyone. Even in our family's darkest hour, Mark concentrated on the positives that Julia brought to the world. And I would be remiss if I did not mention Mark's interest in Julia's brother, our oldest and first son, Mike. Mike took an unconventional route to a stable career. But every time Mark came in to Chicago, he visited us and wanted to, now that I think about it, he wanted to coach Mike. Those discussions helped Mike realize that he was becoming an adult himself and needed not only to plan for the future, but take the initial steps into that future. My kids were his kids. The world is a better place with Mark in it. Mark was a gift not only to me, but to my family and countless others. We grieve the loss of a truly great man. Thank you all and love you, Mark, forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Some of the prayers we offer when a dear friend, when a loved one dies, are really a rehearsal for the future, because this prayer, a prayer for wholeness, we can't possibly feel right now, but it reminds us that with time, we will be able to experience a new wholeness as we integrate this profound loss. We sing Oseh Shalom, a prayer for wholeness, for peace. Hi la 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 la, hi la 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 la, hi la 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 la, hi la 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 la. Oseh Shalom Bimroman. Huya Aseh Shalom Aleinu. Ve'al Kol Yisrael. Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel. Ve'imru. Amen. I'd like to invite Mark's son, Mason, to speak about his dad.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
First, I just want to start by saying thank you all for being here. I know it would be nice to gather in person together. I'm trying to be grateful for the fact that we're able to gather here with some of you virtually that we might not have been able to otherwise because of other circumstances. So I'm trying to focus on that and be grateful for that. And we just really appreciate all the stories and, you know, seeing all your faces. It really helps right now. Yeah, it's an honor to talk about my dad. I really love that guy. I think I would start with an anecdote that he's kind of would be proud of, I think. It doesn't really have to do with the rest of my talk, but my dad, as far as I know, is the only person to live his entire life without farting. I thought I might have heard him do it once, but the fact that the rest of his life, I don't know. It was I was doubting myself. Let's just put it that way. So I just wanted to lighten the mood. But, no, but what I want to talk about today with my dad is our relationship to hockey, the sport of hockey, and the reason I want to talk about hockey is because it was kind of where him and I like synced up the most. It was where, you know, his eyes would light up in a different way, and you know, it's where he was kind of most at ease in his life, and it's kind of just easy for me to talk about. So also he always used sports as an analogy for life without fail. Every one of my problems in life could have been related to a racquetball match that he was in. So maybe this is like a little payback just for all the annoying sports analogies, but I think he would appreciate it. And he just really loved this game of hockey. And, you know, I could almost, like, when I was taking these notes, I could almost feel him like chiming in over my shoulder about like little things here or there. So I guess I'll just start kind of explaining, you know, hockey's a game that a lot of people don't understand at first. It is, you know, a small puck, it moves really fast. But the more you take the time to really learn it and the more you watch it, it really kind of does suck you in. And I just feel like that's important context, because he did kind of slide slowly into this game. But I know when he was a kid, you know, he would listen to the Chicago Blackhawks on the radio. You know, games that weren't televised, he would listen on the radio. He was kind of the only sports nut in his family. I know Riva and Noreen, you guys can attest to that. You know, he mainly played other sports as a kid. He would play some street hockey, like Jeff was saying, but he was not necessarily a hockey player. My earliest memories with my dad and hockey were so good. He would take me to play street hockey. There was a man who set it up like every Saturday when the weather was nice. He would just set up these barriers, and you know, I started running around out there when I was 3 years old, pretty much until I was 9. And I just have such fond memories of like waking up and getting in the car, and he would blast Mark Knopfler, who is his favorite musician. And it was just such a good like father-son moment. Yeah, those were the best days. And that was kind of where I developed my love for the game. I remember bragging to my mom after those sessions about how many goals I scored. It's probably where I learned how to count. And he always loved that. And then, you know, I started playing youth hockey, and that became very intense. You know, a lot more work and time and dedication needed to go into that. I remember practicing in my garage, just stick handling and shooting the puck. And I always kind of hoped he would hear me and just come out and join me, because he always loved to do that. And I would say more than 50% of the time he would. And, you know, he asked me questions. He just wanted to help me get better. And, you know, I don't know a lot of even parents who would take the time to do that on top of all the time he was already taking to drive me to practice and do all these other things. It was just so fun and special for me. You know, I remember, you know, he would stand at the window during my practices, and I could tell he was like analyzing the game, like Rabbi Dan was saying. It's I don't know, he just wanted to learn more, whether it was just to talk with me about it or because he loved the game in general. I think it was a mixture of both, but he was just studying it all the time. He wasn't always right about hockey. I definitely got annoyed sometimes with his like analysis of every single moment of every single game, but you cannot doubt that he really cared. And that was really special for me. You know, one of some of the times I cherish the most with him are just driving to and from my practices and games, because it was most of the time it was him. And, you know, really I could always count on those drives. And like looking back on it, if I were to tell him one thing, it was, you know, just how much I appreciated him just being there for me on those, you know, having those discussions basically like through my teenage years. You know, I didn't really want to talk to him half the time, but he was always so patient with me. And it just spoke about who he was. And, you know, I hope one day I get to do a similar thing. He was also just a huge hockey fan. You know, the Chicago Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup in 2012 and 2013. He was very excited for that. And this was our version of the Stanley Cup. It's just a cup.
It says Stanley.
It says Stanley on it. I guess you could say that's clever. But he's been a Sharks fan since forever. San Jose Sharks, as Rabbi Dan was saying, he would take friends and family. He loved that. You know, we went to some great games together. That was really fun. even standing and just watching games on TV. You know, we're right next to my TV right now, and I can like picture him standing there and him and I just kind of anxiously analyzing every moment of every game. And something very strange about my dad, if he could have had another career besides what he did, it would have been a sports broadcaster. And he always talked about that. But it was eerie how many times he would say exactly, and I mean word for word, exactly what the broadcaster would say before they said it on TV. Word for word. It happened probably every other week. I mean, it was strange. The only thing holding him back was he couldn't pronounce people's names very well. But who knows? Yeah. So he was there really for every second of my hockey journey, and I think he really enjoyed it the whole way. And I just remember, you know, my senior night, pretty recently, last February, at the University of Washington, just when I got to take a picture with you and him, and just how grateful I felt in that moment for my dad and you too, but just all the time, dedication and effort, and the joy he got out of it. And I'm just really going to be grateful for that. And the last piece of it is roller hockey. And, you know, many of you know he was playing roller hockey when he died. And I just think that that's one part of it that really only I'm able to speak on in the way that he might like. So I'm going to do my best to kind of go for that. So, you know, he had knee surgery. He had 2 knee surgeries. He used to love to run, but, you know, once he had the knee surgeries, he couldn't run anymore. And I think it was frustrating him. But then he found roller hockey, which didn't put as much stress on his knees. And, you know, he kind of just took off with that. He really, really loved that. And then he had something to talk about with me because it was hockey. And he just, every time I called him, he would talk about it, you know. And he would go out there and skate alone half the time. And he would just put in his music and try new things. He was practicing. He just really wanted to get better. And he had a drive to get better in that, and, you know, everything he did. He would ask me for tips, and it was just fun. And I think it's important to note, like, in the 2 or 3 years he was doing this, he got legitimately better. He was like, it was impressive how much progress he actually made. And that's coming from someone who also had to learn hockey at some point. And he was doing it at an old age, not relatively old age. And I was just really proud of him. And, you know, he told me this story pretty recently. He's kind of insecure about getting into an actual hockey game. I could tell that. But he did it. He went and he played in this pickup game on a Saturday, and he's hard on himself. Even after the game, he's like, I just don't know if I belong out there. And I was like, well, did you score? And he's like, yeah, I did score. And I was like, that's amazing. And, you know, just having him like tell the story of him scoring a goal, it was, he went back and he made a defensive play. He said a really good defensive play. And he was hustling back the other way, and some guy passed to him, and he shot it top shelf and scored. And I just remember how happy it made me to hear that story. I was like, my dad's like doing what he loves, and he only started this a couple years ago. And I don't know, it was just, to me, it was the best. It is the best. And you know, the only thing I wish I could have done with him is pass him the puck for a goal and celebrated a goal with my dad. I think that would have been really special. And so that it all kind of comes to a close here in a really weirdly fitting way. The last conversation I had with him was, I guess, a week ago. Well, no, 2 weeks ago today. You know, for some reason, I couldn't let him get off the phone without talking about very specific drills for him to go out there and work on the rink. And so that was kind of the last thing I left him off with, and then, said goodbye. And, his last moments were spent out on the rink, probably working on something that I was telling him. And so it brings me closure just to know that. And just to know he died really, really doing something he loved. He talked about it all the time. And so I find comfort in that. He was really just hitting his stride in hockey and in life. And I just really love my dad, and I'm going to miss him a lot. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mason. Religion wasn't that important to Mark, but people were. And I remember that he came to a funeral, and after the funeral, he came up to me and he asked about a particular prayer, and I was surprised. Mark's asking about a prayer, and he said that it spoke to him, and we ended up talking about it, and this is that prayer. It's called Life After Death. These things I know, how the living go on living and how the dead go on living with them, so that in a forest, even a dead tree casts a shadow, and the leaves fall one by one, and the branches break in the wind, and the bark peels off slowly, and the trunk cracks, and the rain seeps in through the cracks, and the trunk falls to the ground, and the moss covers it. And in the spring, the rabbits find it and build their nest inside the dead tree, so that nothing is wasted in nature or in love. Amen. Before we say the Kadisha Tome, the Mourner's Kaddish, like to ask one of Mark's most important teachers to say a few words about her dad. Whenever Mark would go visit Shana, he would always come back and say, "You're not going to believe this. This is what Shana taught me." And he always talked about how Shana was growing and developing, and he was so moved by her discovery, her curiosity, her compassion for people and the earth. So I want to honor this teacher and daughter, Shana.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Dan, and thank you for everybody who is here. It's been very moving to see just how many people are here. And it's kind of ironic that we're doing his funeral, well, part one of his funeral over computer, because he was such a computer guy. And now here we all are on a computer talking about him. And he was always seeing the way the world was going, how we were becoming more and more dependent on technology. And he would always say, technology is never going to replace human to human interaction. And, you're absolutely right, Dad. This does not cut it at all. And it's been very hard. This has been a tragedy, and it's been very hard to not be around anybody. But I'm glad that we can do this, at least because, like Mason said, there's so many people who, I'm seeing there's people from all over the country. There's people from England here. He touched so many people in so many places. So it's one nice thing about the computer is that you can bring all those people together. God, I didn't even prepare so much, but I have so many stories about him that I figured I'd just speak about him, because I could talk about him for days. but I'll keep it short, I promise. I'll keep it shorter than that. And yeah, he was a very special man to me. I'm gonna marry this guy, but he was really the first love of my life. He had so many relationships. He had family, who was very important. He had friends, also very important. Everyone was very important. Business people. He was a coach. He was a neighbor. He went to the temple. You know, no matter who you were in his life, he would form a special bond with you. And he was the kind of person who would get down to the bottom of things. He like Rabbi Dan said, he didn't like small talk. He would get down to the bottom line. And if you were struggling, he would uplift you. If you were triumphing, he would celebrate with you. He would meet you where you were, and he would give you what you needed where you were, no matter where you were. I remember I struggled a lot when I was a kid. I don't know why, but he would always sit with me when I needed him to. I remember I would be in my room and he'd come and he'd just sit on my bed and he'd be with me. And he would encourage me. And he would do that no matter what I was doing in my life. He would be there with me to talk about it. There's so many things I could say about my dad. He was such a multi-dimensional man, and he had so much going on in his life. And words really can't capture him, but maybe I could show you this picture. This picture's been really, you can't really see it very well, but I think this really captures, that's him and me. I think it really captures like the soul of our relationship. He's holding me. I look like I just laughed really hard. And that's what he would do. He would make me laugh, like no matter where I was. He would just get me, and he would make so many people laugh like that. And he did learn a lot from me and the things that I went through, and I learned a lot from him. The dialogue that we had was one of the richest things in my whole life. And when he died, one of the first things I thought was, like, does this mean we can't talk anymore? And that was the first thing that really hit me so hard, that I had to realize that we can't talk anymore, because that was so valuable to both of us. And we talk about everything. We talked about everything. We talked about the things going on in our lives. We talked about the things going on in the world. We talked about our struggles and our triumphs, and what is the truth and what is not. And we struggled with it all. And even if we disagreed, even if we couldn't come to some common truth, and even if it got really heated, at the end of the conversations, he would just say, I love you, and I'm so glad that we're talking about this, and I'm so glad we can keep talking. It didn't matter what we thought, where we were aligned. It just didn't matter, because at the core, we loved each other. And we were just talking this morning about how much we wish we could be better. like how much different we would be if he were with us right now, how much differently we'd be treating him. And we were talking about how it's difficult to meet people where we really want to meet them. Like in this life, we're always reaching for our loved ones in different ways. And there's always so much that gets in the way. And that's just the reality of loving another person. But Dad always was reaching for his loved ones. And he was always reaching for that center in his loved ones. And that was the most important thing for him. And then he would talk about everybody because he knew that center in everybody. He would talk about them with so much love. I want to say so much more about him, but it would really fill up days and days, and we have a limited time here. I hope that some of you can come to his actual funeral and we could talk some more and share some real hugs and have some real tears and real laughs. But I'm really glad that you all are here, and I wanted to say that a lot of you have been keeping my family here in your thoughts and your prayers, and I really appreciate that. You know, we're gonna be okay. We're struggling now, but we're gonna come out stronger for this. And really, if anybody could have prepared us for something like this, it was him. He always cheered us through adversity, and this is a time of adversity. I love you, Dad. I'm so grateful that I had him as a dad. I could not have asked for anybody better. Thank you.
Thank you, Shana. If you're able, please rise for the mourner's Kaddish. I know that most of you don't have it in front of you. If you wish to say it, I'll say it slowly and you can join in with me. Yit Kadal, V'yit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, V'alma Divra Chirutei, V'amlich Malchutei, B'chayechon, Uvyomechon, Uvchaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala Uvizman Kariv, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach, Le'olam u'le'olmei olmaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudisha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata ta'amiran bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru. Amen. Oseh Shalom B'imromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'imru. Amen. Zecher, 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 Tzadik Livracha, Livracha, May his memory bless our days, bless our days. Amen. We close this Shiva gathering in memory of Mark with a prayer that asks us to continue to tell his stories, to stay connected to his wondrous spirit. Please join in the refrain. We remember them. In the rising of the sun and in its going down.
We remember them.
In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter.
We remember them.
In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring.
We remember them.
In the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer.
We remember them.
In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn.
We remember them.
In the beginning of the year and when it ends.
We remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength.
We remember them.
When we are lost and sick at heart.
We remember them.
When we have joys we want to share.
We remember them.
When we have decisions that are difficult to make.
We remember them.
When we have achievements that are based on theirs.
We remember them.
So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as
we remember them.
Amen.
Amen.
This brings the Shiva to a close. We say to the mourners, Hamakom yenachem etchem betoch sha'ar avelei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you among the mourners of our people. Amen. Take care.